Hello everyone, welcome to this lecture on desalination. At the end of this lecture, you will know what desalination is, the different methods of performing desalination, desalination by reverse osmosis, and desalination by electrodialysis and electrodialysis reversal. Desalination is a separation process wherein the salt content that is present in saline water is removed completely, or it is reduced so that the water can be used for different purposes such as drinking, irrigation, etc. The feed or your saline water, it can either come from the sea, from estuaries, which is called as the brackish water. It can also come from various wells and surface waters such as rivers and streams, wastewater and industrial feed, as well as processed waters. So when you have desalination, you will have three liquid streams. The first liquid stream, like I said, it is the feed, which is mostly seawater and or brackish water. This is fed to the desalination process setup, which can either be a reverse osmosis or electrodialysis and electrodialysis reversal. So after the process of desalination takes place, you get two more streams. One is the fresh water, that is called as permeate, which will have very less concentration of salt. And the second stream is the waste stream, which is called as brine. And in the brine, the concentration of salt will be much higher than that was present in the feed. So you have this fresh water. The first method of desalination was performed by the Nitte, which is by use of distillation. For distillation, you require a lot of heat energy to boil the liquid to its boiling point, after which it can be condensed. So this energy was obtained from the waste heat of the ship engines. This distillation type desalination system works well, but it has one major disadvantage, that is you require a large amount of energy for vaporizing the water. That is why you have other methods which do not require as much energy, such as reverse osmosis, electrodialysis and electrodialysis reversal. So this desalination by reverse osmosis, it was developed in 1960s, and this requires much lesser energy than distillation. Energy is required only for application of pressure to pump the fluid into the reverse osmosis membrane, and the principle is that the pressure which is applied has to be greater than the osmotic pressure, then the reverse osmosis will take place. We have already studied the principle behind reverse osmosis in great detail. So the pressure that has to be applied for reverse osmosis to happen for brackish water desalination is between 250 to 400 psi. Brackish water and seawater, the difference is that in brackish water, the concentration of salt is much lesser than that present in the seawater. So when it comes to seawater desalination requires much higher pressure because the concentration of salt in seawater is higher. So here a pressure of 800 to 1000 psi has to be applied. So when you have desalination by reverse osmosis, this is the complete setup which is used for desalination. The desalination plant will have these different parts in it. So the desalination process by reverse osmosis has four major steps. First step is the pre-treatment step. Now in the pre-treatment step, the water has to be pre-treated so that it is suitable enough to be passed through the membrane modules. Here the pre-treatment steps include pH adjustment, that is the pH of the water has to be adjusted, and also the sediments have to be separated. That is the first step. In the second step, which is pressurization, it refers to pumping of this pre-treated seawater or brackish water by means of a high pressure pump into the membrane module. So the different pressure ranges we've already seen, which is required for seawater and brackish water. So at that pressure, this pressure pump will pump the pre-treated water into the membrane module. Then you have the third step, that is your membrane separation process. The reverse osmosis membranes will be arranged in modules such as spiral wound module or hollow fiber modules. So in this modules, the actual process of desalination takes place, wherein the water will cross the membrane, whereas the salt remains on the other side of the membrane. And finally, you have the last step, that is the post-treatment process, wherein the water which comes out of this membrane modules has to be treated. The treatment here which occurs is adjustment of pH. The pH is brought to a near neutral pH value of around 7, and also degasification process is carried out so that this water can be used. So this is how the entire desalination process setup or a plant looks like, and these are the various steps that are carried out within the setup. So this we've already studied in detail, the reverse osmosis membrane modules. You know that desalination by reverse osmosis makes use of two types of membrane modules. The first one is spiral wound membrane module, which is the most common type, and the second one is the hollow fiber membrane module. We've already studied this in detail in the previous lecture. Desalination by electrodialysis. It is a voltage driven membrane process. That is, you make the salts which are present in the seawater pass through the membrane by means of an electric potential, and the fresh water remains behind the membrane. This is exactly opposite to that of the reverse osmosis. In reverse osmosis process, the salt remains behind, whereas water crosses the membrane. The membranes which are used for electrodialysis are similar to that of reverse osmosis, such as cellulose acetate membranes and polyamide membranes. You know that most of the salts, when they are present in water, they dissociate themselves to form ions, that is positively charged ions or negatively charged ions. For example, when you have NaCl dissolved in water, you will have Na plus and Cl minus ions. So under the effect of an electric potential, these ions, the charged ions which are present in water, they will move towards the opposite charged electrodes. So what is done during electrodialysis is that membranes are constructed wherein you have selective passage of either positively charged ions or negatively charged ions when the electric potential is applied. This desalination process by the use of electrodialysis is usually used to desalinate water which has less salt concentration, such as brackish water, rather than seawater, because seawater has a very high salt content. Electrodialysis reversal. As the name suggests, it is reversing the current on the electrodes, reversing the charge on the electrodes. The concentrated ions which are present, they will form a deposition on the membrane, which leads to membrane fouling. So this has to be cleaned. The ions and the scales or the slime which is deposited on the membrane, that has to be cleaned, or else it leads to membrane fouling. So this is done by electrodialysis reversal. So electrodialysis reversal means the polarity or the charge on the electrodes is reversed. So when this happens, the ions which are deposited on the membrane, they will suddenly get attracted to the opposite direction. So when this happens, the ions which are deposited on the membrane, they are thrown off from the membrane into the solution. And it results in flushing of the membrane. The scales, the slime and the deposits which are on the membrane will be removed from the surface of the membrane, and this results in reduction of membrane fouling. So we've reached the end of this topic on desalination, and we've come to the end of this lecture. Thank you very much.